Bodiless is a VR experience. In the period of the 1970s to the 1980s, it was the time of martial law and the white terror in Taiwan. The inspiration for the text and the story actually coming from my childhood. My mom often told us the stories of our family. Yet, in recent years, my mom suffered from dementia. So I thought perhaps I could turn the stories she had told us, the place we lived, and the people and the things back in the days, into an experience beyond reality, so that one day, when I finish, I could give my mommy vision of her story. Perhaps it will bring back the memories for her about the stories she had told us. I believe now that we have things like VR, we will also start to remember our past through different means, and that will affect us in the ways we experience things. In fact, when I created such VR experience, I feel heavily my subjectivity as well. It becomes a narrative via our own feelings, to retell the story back and share with others. People will feel that when they experience the day back in time in flesh, they can learn about the emotions harbored beneath and the ideas within. That's something I consider important. That is, how to recollect the history of our own via new media. Bodiless is based on the folk practice local to Taiwan, such as Wang boat burning, Qi and Ba 8 generals, parade array, and other folk elements. They are individuals who suffered much in history, who might have encountered misfortune. Yet, in the folk religion, when we consider certain figures shining with their great characters, they will be apotheosized as deity in our religion and imagination. I think of it a process in the society to transform injustice into justice. Although I adopt the latest technology such as virtual reality today, not just in the folk religion, but in the technology today, or the progress we speak of. This is a social transformation process quite worthy of preservation. Also, it deserves a due respect as well.
With VR, we may touch upon spaces more unknown to us. This is the experience I have profoundly. It sets you free from the reality and into another milieu or another space. This is what I was intrigued by. That is, in terms of music or in terms of visuals in VR, where do we take the audience to through the medium? Is it to inspire people's imagination, or to convey certain messages with these images? Then, I also find it interesting to visualize something more metaphysical. That's actually quite fascinating.
We often think of ourselves, the days of singular reign in the past stay in the past. Nevertheless, I find it strange that with all the abilities for rapid communication, digital tools can record the trails of humanity down to the details. However, in the digital network nowadays, we start to reduce humanity yet again. As a result, with our digital tools for reign of the new age, we return to the condition under the authoritarian regime back in time. Even within our social networks, we start to treat people around us in this reducing fashion. This is the phenomenon I would like to address in Bodiless.
Okay, so this project investigates both national and personal memory. And as you guys could see, there's a lot of use of surrealist visuals. There's a play in scale at that one instance toward the end where the character is reading the newspaper. The camera goes through these buildings that look like old buildings, but they're sitting there on the table. So they're playing with scale in order to kind of create something fantastical. Is there anything else that stood out to you as far as how a sense of history or fantasy or memory is represented in what we saw of this Bodiless project? Also, this goes for the people online too. What did you guys think as far as the visuals? Does it look alluring or just strange?
I have some thoughts.
Here we go. Okay, Christy, go ahead.
If I heard it correctly, my internet was acting up, but was the creator mentioning dementia?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess maybe it's just because I worry a lot, but I guess the idea of having dementia or Alzheimer's is just really terrifying to me conceptually. And I've looked at some other exploratory works that kind of dive deep into the mindset of someone who might have either of those conditions. And I do feel like the author kind of, not the author, sorry, but the creator kind of really displayed that nicely in a way because a lot of times when you were going throughout the video, you could kind of see that the faces are kind of an awkward blur or mesh where it's really familiar, but at the same time it isn't. And I guess it was a little unnerving, but I think it did give a good sense of what someone who had dementia might have gone through because it's um the memories kind of go in and out from what I know of the condition, and it's kind of terrifying. So I think the idea that they were able to kind of portray that is really interesting, but also very heartbreaking because it's just a really scary condition. So yeah.
Also, it seems like it was somebody who was imprisoned, and maybe it had to do with the Cultural Revolution. I haven't done the project myself, so it's hard to know. But here we see what you're mentioning, where it goes from a much more naturalistic representation to a low polygon texture of the character. Angie, what were your thoughts? You could pull down your mask. I'm sorry, the face. Oh, mask. Uh-huh. So Angie's talking about the surreal, how surreal it was. A portion with a mask blocking the face. Christopher? Yeah, taking a traditional ritual and finding a way to re-represent it in digital format. Okay. Any last thoughts on this? Yeah, Nene? Yeah. There's a lot of grayscale, and then color really pops out a lot more when it's yeah. Yeah. And the red, like in that, just in that, what we just saw, the red really stands out here. So. Okay, so this is one artist who's received a lot of attention and very dedicated in using VR as a primary medium to investigate cultural and personal history. And he likes collaborating. He's collaborated a lot with from that other I'm blanking on her name, with Laurie Anderson. And hopefully you guys checked out A Trip to the Moon, which is a much longer, like a 15-minute documentation interview with them about that project. So I want to share a couple personal projects to make a couple points. One, this project is a few years old, but when there's a giant development called Essex Crossing on Essex and Delancey that was over, at the time, the biggest development in the history of New York City. And there was low-income housing that was destroyed back in the mid-60s, and people were promised that they would be able to return in a couple of years to their homes. And this is back in like 1966. But due to a ton of corruption between the city and developers, that lot stayed empty for decades until toward the end of what's his name, Bloomberg, the final Bloomberg year or so. He was able to bring to a close the plan that is now Essex Crossing. It's still, I think there's still buildings that are being built, but it's largely there. So I did when the Bloomberg plan was initially realized, I think only like 10% was going to be low-income housing, and the community pulled together and fought that, and it was a real major win because it jumped to, I don't remember if it's 50-50, but a much higher percentage, something that was considered a major win insofar as a community fighting developers in order to bring back low-income housing. And there are even people like the New York Times ran a story with several people that were displaced in 1966. And so one person was a 6-year-old at that time. And the city went out and sought the people that lived there at that time. And for example, found this one person who now has an apartment in Essex Crossing. So I did interviews around there, but I was also thinking about, how wealth exists in this city. And the reason I want to share this is there's one sequence that's a video sequence that I shot here in the TV studio. So this TV studio is available to all of us, and I just wanted to use it more for the blue screen for what was kind of supposed to be like a real estate commercial. So when we get back, we'll have April 27th to present the environment, and then we'll have May 4th, May 11th, all the way to the 18th to realize your final projects. So you might want to think about like, oh, maybe I want to shoot a video that exists within my environment. I don't know, different ways of adding more media to the environment. And this is also tied to the video player that I want to talk about in the demo. So this project is called Desplazados. No, it's going to be too loud.
The city's going to grow and change. It's natural. That's what happens. We get more people. We're going to need more apartments. These upscale buildings.
So
that come in here,
the interviews are just 3D audio that's played throughout the environment. The environment is a kind of tenement package that I found, that I purchased in the asset store. But then I added my, like this chase image, I added my own elements, and then there's some things that, like this is.
We made these cities at the turn of the century. People like you and me, hardworking people that just wanted to stay in America. Why is New York only?
There are some pickups. This project has been presented as a VR, but this is the desktop version.
Your shoes, we sell your shoes. We run your hotels. We clean your bathrooms in your hotels. We wait on you. We bring your car around. We do a lot of things that you don't want to do yourself. Why can't we live here?
So a lot of the textures
if they have middle income, but as a person
were redone for.
I find that everything is geared either for the luxury status or the lower income status, so it's really frustrating. Well, I don't think that we have enough public, what's the word for it? Social amenities here. I don't think we have enough schools. I don't think we have enough dentists, doctors, hospitals, etc. space in this area for healthcare, for social care.
So she was talking specifically about that neighborhood. I want to show some of the video from the beginning.
So prices go up because they like to spend money. What do you want me to do here?
Some ads from the time. So there's a couple scripted portions. One is triggered when you enter into this space, although it's in Spanish.
Hasta el día que el ser humano se libere del deseo para ser dueño de la tierra, se libere del deseo capitalista.
So if you leave that area, it will silence or pause, but then it'll
Las consecuencias catastróficas del capitalismo imperialista seguirán
head back.
From East New York. Like where I'm from is mostly houses. Like all the house owners own their own houses, so we don't have that.
So this is a video. It's supposed to be kind of like think of it as a real estate ad. And all but the narrator is just found footage.
Today, wealth is accumulated through entertainment or real estate. If you don't have the talent to entertain, to capture the imagination of young and old, then real estate is your ticket to wealth.
Where are they going? I mean, they're
Put your
building up
generational wealth to
parking
work
lots.
by purchasing a luxury condo. You already own a home? Then buy a second home as a passive income stream. Your parents, grandparents, great-grandparents worked hard for you to enjoy your modern-day comforts. Now, it is your responsibility to grow the wealth passed on to you so that your children and descendants may continue a life of endless opportunities or leisure, if they so wish.
Wanted to stay in America.
Don't have the cash for a down payment? No worries. Low interest loans are available. You may even take a loan for the down payment.
We shine your shoes, we sell
Don't
your
have the
shoes.
credit score to purchase a
We run
home?
your hotels,
For a small
we clean
fee,
your
we
bathrooms
can
in
help
your
you fix
hotels.
that. After all,
We
credit
wait on
scores
you.
are just numbers.
Bring your car
We will
around.
help you realize
Do a lot
financial
of things that
freedom.
you don't want to do yourself.
Afraid of debt?
Can't we live there?
Don't be. Wealth is accumulated through debt. Debt is merely a wealth mechanism. Radical uncertainty and ceaseless change is the new reality. Embrace it and take control.
But yeah, it's supposed to be a little sarcastic. And the that actress is actually was a student here at Hunter
Well, I don't think that we have enough
from
public.
the theater department.
What's the word for it? Social amenities here. I don't think we have enough
So as I walk through the space, these towers are growing the entire time of the.
at such a space.
And at one point, there's a trigger here that will explode a building and start a new tower.
And I think that
Both in front.
housing, but I don't know that the city always
Demographics
goes
of the
for
neighborhood instead of being
everything
Puerto
else
Rico
that
or
goes with
Latino,
extra.
right? And black.
1,000 units probably it could
It's
be
now,
anywhere from 1,000 to.
sorry to say, more white.
Okay.
And so prices go up.
So another project, more recent one that I'm still working on is I want to show in order to think about how to customize your textures. For this project, a lot of
FinTech for the precariat, a pandemic journey through the many realities of finance. Welcome to the age of Bezos. In spring 2020, COVID-19 compounded existential insecurity. The pandemic of stress was inseminated by the novel flu virus to birth a new reality, a chasm of uncertainty. As unemployment soared in 2020, speculative futures drove us.
okay, so for example, this "Don't Kneel on Me," this is graffiti on a construction site in Brooklyn on 4th Avenue, and took a picture of it, then opened the textures for this. This package is, again, another package that I found in the unit that I purchased on the Unity Asset Store that has ads, but then you can also customize those ads, such as adding these characters or adding "Don't Kneel on Me." I've mentioned this already. I use the iPad Pro to scan these stone barricades from Wall Street. And I also scanned the bull. I think I showed you guys the texture that represents more of like a surreal Wall Street with using the terrain tool to set up peaks and mountains that I was trying to allude to stocks and how they fall and rise. And then other things like both of these assets were just, I think one was like $9, another one was $6 from the Unity Asset Store. And this entire city pack was actually only $35. One of the trickiest thing was thinking about like how to close out this environment and not have this city be kind of an endless space. And so I went around and shot construction walls around the city. And you know, with photography in general, outdoor photography, the best time is to go when the sun is down. I think I mentioned for the bull, I went very early in the morning in order to scan the bull so that there isn't too much light bouncing around. And so that's how I went about closing off the environment so that it's a limited space that people can traverse. And there are these, I've thought about changing this, but there's these floating orbs, and these are the ones that have the interviews that are triggered when one picks them up.
Okay, so we know that like financialization is just like completely destroying what's left of our society. The people who are most invested emotionally, psychically invested in finance, maybe their attitude is, what if we make everyone like us? I think that responsibility needs to lie where the power lies. If it,
then you can throw them and just keep walking. And so also these posters were, again, I brought these green construction plywood into Photoshop and added these elements. Some of them I added straight in Unity as just another element on top of the green walls. I took illustrations from 20 and 20 that I had been doing and added them as posters into the environment. So ideally, although you guys are gathering these assets from different places, you're also thinking about how can I customize these assets to make them into my own project rather than just recycling them. And I'm using the procedural sky, but I get to an open area over here. But besides the procedural sky, I created a giant sphere and textured that giant sphere with a transparent PNG that is all of these different altcoin logos. And that's kind of, they're slowly moving like we did with the Skybox example. So those are all exported out of, I found a vector package of these icons and then brought them into Illustrator to lay them out and then exported the PNG from there. So, let's see, is there anything else that I wanted to bring up about this project? And the iPad Pros, you know, remember that those are available. You can check them out for at least 2 hours. And if that's not enough time, just talk to me and I can tell Peter that you might need them for more time if there's things that you're interested in scanning to have to put into your environment. Okay. Any questions about, you know, these ideas? Again, like thinking about adding video, thinking about customizing textures, thoughts? No? Yeah, no. Yeah. Okay, so I'll show that in the demo. So the video I exported from, in this case, first Premiere and then After Effects, and I exported it as H.264 format and then P4 format, and then brought that in as an asset into Unity. And then video is used as a texture. In this case, I used it onto a plane. So I created a new 3D object as a plane and then applied the video to it. And so let's jump over to the demo for today. Does anybody on Zoom have any questions? Okay, thanks, Christy. Yuan, thank you. Yes, Kevin. Yeah, so that's also the demo. So it's about colliders and having colliders that could trigger video, could trigger audio, could trigger anything to play. So yeah, let's jump into that. So I do have a presentation that walks through my notes for today. And so we're going to be looking at this basic interaction. I'll go ahead and open that. And I have the environment already set up, but so what I'm going to, with scripts that you could use, these scripts work for desktop. And for VR, it's actually easier because a lot of this interactivity is built into the Oculus or Unity packages. So as that, okay. I want to refer to a few notes before I jump into. So there's physics material that we'll look at. So Unity offers an excellent set of physics algorithms. By adding a collider component to any game object, you can give it a physics material to adjust friction and bouncing effects of colliding objects. It's important to note that if the is trigger, and this is in the info box for any, let's see, so I have these red balls here. One of them has a pickup script on it. And it has so any box or any cube or sphere or any of these 3D objects are going to have a collider. And as far as having them be interactive, you need to turn on in the inspector, you need to turn on this is trigger in order for it to be interactive with so this cube, for example, has two colliders. It has the box collider that it comes with, and its trigger isn't turned on. Because what happens is when you turn on his trigger, the physics that mimics the real world gets turned off. So in this case, there's two colliders. There's the collider that it comes with, and then there's additional second collider that has the is trigger turned on. And we'll go through that step by step. So physics material to adjust friction and bouncy effects of colliding objects. It's important to note that if is trigger property is turned on, the collider is used for triggering events and is ignored by the physics engine. However, you can add two colliders, one with is trigger off and will be affected by physics of your project, and a second to act as a trigger. By adding a rigid body component to any game object, you can give it gravity and act under the control of physics. The rigid body can receive forces and torque to make your object move in a realistic way. So this means that objects to interact with need a collider, such as box, capsule, sphere, mesh collider, and a rigid body. So these are the two key components that you need to add. So if, for example, I'm going to add a new sphere, 3D object, and I'm going to turn it right now. There's a few cameras. I'm going to turn on the main camera. I pointed out this last week that a lot of times for testing and seeing if things work, you might want to make use of how you've set up your view in your editor for a scene. So if I turn on the main camera and then go to game object, align with view, this will, right now you can see it, the main camera is set up. If I go ahead and hit play, the main camera is all the way over by that brown box. But for demonstration, I just want a different view. So I'm going to go to main camera, game object, and align with view. And so now when I hit play, so this sphere it's not doing anything. It's just floating there. Nothing's happening with it. As soon as I add, so there's two components that I want. I'll add a rigid body and test it. So as soon as I add the rigid body, it's saying use the physics engine. This is part of this world, and it should react as we do in the natural world. If I want this to be interactive and I turn on trigger, it's going to ignore. It's just going to fall through the ground. So it's going to ignore. The ground is just a plane with a basic material. So in this case, if I want the sphere to both be interactive and reactive to the world, I need to add a second collider. And it'll be a sphere collider. So this one, I can leave the trigger on and have it be interactive, and this second collider will tell the engine that, yeah, this object should react to the world. It shouldn't just fall through the plane. Now, if I want it to, like the other ones, to have a bounce to them, Unity offers, if I go to my assets area and I go to create and I look for physics material, and I'll call it bouncy. So it has dynamic friction, static friction, bounciness, and then how it should interact with whatever it hits or touches. Right now I'll leave. So dynamic, static, and bounciness are all designed to set to have a value between 0 and 1. If I leave it at 0, nothing happens. If I nothing happens. I think I want this to multiply. So it'll multiply between the bounciness that I'm giving to this object and whatever it's hitting. No. Okay, this is when I refer my notes because. Okay, so we create a physics material, change the default properties of material. Dynamic friction, static friction are by default 0.6, a fraction of 1, because when you multiply fractions, you end up with a smaller and smaller number until it gets to 0, as things come to a halt. If you intend to mimic realism, leave these values at 0.6 and change bounciness to the same value of 0.6. If, for example, it was 1 times 1, it would never stop bouncing. And I go, so I do have a folder with physics materials, and one of them has this infinite bounce. So this is the value that I wasn't changing. This bounce combined maximum. I go, let's see. Now it should have more of a bounce to it. No, why is it not? Oh, 6. All right, I do have working examples. So I set this up for a reason. So dynamic, static, and bounciness are designed to be kept at a value from 0 to 1. Friction combines average. 2 friction values are averaged out, and this is between the object that you're applying the physics material and whatever it might hit. Bounce combined maximum, the largest friction of 2 values is used. So if you apply the new physics material to your bouncy game object through its collider in the material field. Oh yeah, I haven't. Did I even apply it? I think that's what. So yeah, I hadn't applied it. So I don't want to apply it to the one that is trigger. That one is being used if I was going to add an interactive script to it. So I'm going to add it to the collider that is intended to apply gravity to this object. So here for that collider, there's you can edit the collider itself. The turning on trigger, and here is the material. So now that I've added the physics material, it'll react according to these settings. I'll set this back to average. And so in this case, like the one in the back, it's just going to keep bouncing infinitely because it's multiplying. The bounciness is set to 1, so it's just multiplying 1 times 1. But if we, like do the 0.6, it'll get, when you multiply 2 decimals, it'll just get smaller and smaller. So there's several physics materials that are already built into Unity. So carpet, concrete, grass, gravel, max friction, wood, and zero friction are all physics materials that are intended to have different either planes or terrains or different areas in an environment to have a different physical reaction, or the objects that are interacting with them will have will react differently. And you can also apply these to objects. So I have this sphere, and I'll change it to concrete. And the bounciness that's gone, it just acts like a piece of concrete falling through the sky. Okay, so I'll delete this one and just look at, so Ball Infinite has, and I'll get rid of this. So in the physics material are two physics folder. There's 2 physics materials that I created for the sake of example. And one, the infinite bounce has the bounciness set at 1 versus 0.7 on the rubber ball. All right, so if I go to ball pickup, so there's a pickup script that is added to this, and these scripts, I included links to wherever, whether it was reworking a YouTube tutorial or where I co-opted the script, not being a programmer and being a visual artist, I look at whatever is available out there as far as like figuring out how to make things interactive. So I comment links that I use, and this has a few public variables, can hold, item, temp parent, is holding. So in this case, this is designed to be able to be a pickup that is put in front of the user's camera. And rather than using, previously I had used a first person controller from the Unity asset starter, from the asset store. They have a starter kit. And that one had the new cinema cam, or the new camera that, or set of, not so new, it's a couple of years old. And it seemed like downloading those was, downloading those packages with that already set up was causing problems. So for this, I decided to use a different first person controller. So I'm going to turn off the main camera. So this is, so I have a couple first person controllers here. And this one has, it's freely, the newer version, which we'll look at, is freely available and has a whole lot of interactivity that's already scripted and ready to go, or also movement that's set up and ready to go, and easily adding a reticle with this crosshair variable. So in order for the script to work, I added empty game object and called it held object. And all it has is this Z setting of 2.5, so that the object is in front of the camera. So if I go back to, I'll pick up, and if I change temp parent to this held object. So what happens with the script is that rather than this object having its own position, it's parented to the first person controller once the collider, once the collision is detected between the first person controller and the object. So if I play this, and in the script, there's a specific distance that you have to, no, I'm gonna lose it, that you have to be at in order to pick it up. So I included a couple different ways of doing this. So in this one, I'm using my left mouse button to hold it, and I have to keep it down because if I let go of the button, it'll drop, and then the right click throws the object. Whereas with the box, which I think I set up for, yeah, I set up with the other FPC. So I'm going to go to the box and cube. So I want to walk through a different first person controller for this, and actually I'll walk through that one instead, because this one's kind of, it's an older version of this super FPC. So I've mentioned this super character controller. It's freely available in the Unity asset store. It's pretty popular and has a lot of scripts that are ready to go built into it. So I opened it in Unity, imported it into this project, and it comes into in a publish folder, which I got rid of, and then just moved this super character controller folder one level up so that it's at the root level of assets. So in it, there's a demo that I think we looked at last week. And the demo, actually, so for those of you guys looking for more low polygon assets, this package comes with a lot of stuff that can be used. So the setup for this is this super first person controller and then the camera. In this super character controller, there's a whole lot of settings. So similarly as a crosshair, the camera has this crosshair sprite where you can import or you can place whatever, if you create your own reticle, you could import it and add it as a reticle for your project through this super first person controller. So I'm gonna go to demo assets. Sorry, it looks different than. All right, I'm just gonna add it to my scene. And I do want a reticle, so I'm gonna add this large and make sure this is working. Okay. So it has these three stripes in the lower left that I don't want, which are these survival stats. So there's a lot of, since it's kind of built for a first person shooter, it comes with things that you may or may not want to use. And in this case, to the camera, I want to add an empty game object for that script, for the pickup script, so that I can position whatever it picks up in front of the camera. So with any prefab and prefabs that you might incorporate from a pre-built package, you can right-click it and break it apart by prefab unpack completely. And so when you modify it, you're not just modifying this version of the prefab, but it's no longer a prefab. It's a unique game object. And if I go to create empty, we'll call it hold the object and give it a Z value that puts the object in front of the person. So now if I go to ball pickup and I have these So the item that gets picked up in this case is the ball itself that that has this rubber ball physics material so that it bounces and stops bouncing. And like I did with the previous FPC, I want to put the ball in front of me. So hold object will be the variable for the temporary parent. So when the collider detects that this has been picked up through the script, it's gonna, we'll see that the ball, this ball pickup disappears from the hierarchy because it has become part of this, which I'm gonna rename super FCP. It becomes part of the first person controller game object. And the cube, similarly, if I want it to be interactive, there's that script comes with 2 public variables, the player and the camera that it should get parents to when being held. So again, pick it up, right click. So the box with this script, you don't have to hold the mouse. I can just pick it up once, walk around with it, walk into this plane that has a video texture. And I'm clicking to try to throw it, but it takes several clicks. So we'll look at that script next. Actually, no. So this is throw object. So if I go to my scripts folder, there's the pickup that we just looked at, which requires both right button click and holding it down, and left clicked and holding it down to hold it, and then right click to throw it. There's this throw object script. And so this one, I assembled a script from a couple different tutorials, and so this one you can walk around with, pick it up, throw it, and the throw, you can give it a different value based on the intended physics of the object. So it has a throw force here that's set at 500. If I double that, it's going to even. At the edge of below this plane, there's a second plane. Which has a destroy script on it, and I just killed myself by accidentally jumping off that. This one up. Okay, I want to get to the edge of this to show. Let me switch out of. Okay, I keep wanting to go to the edge of this in order to show that things are getting destroyed when So right now there's that ball pickup just disappeared. And then I'm getting an error as soon as I kill myself. Okay, so what? Okay, so there's two pickup and throw object are two scripts that you all might want to look at. You might want to customize it. I included the links so you can see the tutorial step by step of how those scripts are set up. And the destroy plane, I keep getting an error, which when I kill myself, there's no longer a camera because the camera that the game is depending on is the first person controller camera. And this white plane that sits under the green plane has a script that is this destroy game object. So that's set up to destroy whatever touches it. So you can imagine, like, if you know, I think Angie, you mentioned when you run into the monster, you get killed. So that would be a script if you want them to just be entirely killed. But in most likely in this one, or what you may want is it resets the player. So this script, destroy game object, it has a non-trigger event, and it's based on two colliders being in contact with one another. And then the function is destroy, which is built into the Unity engine. And in this case, it'll destroy other game objects. So any game object that comes into contact with that white plane gets destroyed from the hierarchy, gets destroyed from the game. But I also have destroy any game object but the player. So if I comment this out and use instead this second set, if other tag is the same as player, other dot transform position, new vector 3, 0, 2 on the Y, 0, that resets the player back at the center of this environment, of this project, else destroy other game object, but it will destroy everything else. So in this case, I won't get a camera error. And then lastly here, if other dot tag is the same as enemy, destroy other game object. So you can have specific objects that have a collider and have the script only destroy specific game objects. So in the, so I broke apart this prefab, but I left it untagged. So tags, you can create your own tags. There's some tags that are already ready-made, like main camera and player. So this one, I want it to be the player. And this way, that script, if other tag player, the player will get reset to the center of the game. Or the center of the environment. So now if I go ahead and just jump off this green plane. Uh-oh. What happened? Game object. Still trying to access your script. Yes. Player. Now let's save the script. Maybe I hadn't saved it. try that again. Okay, so I hadn't saved the script, which is why it wasn't working. But now you can see I thrown myself off the plane and it just resets me to. So you can imagine using that same script to like create a portal, like between, you know, I don't know, like say you're in a village, in the distance you see mountains and you want to teleport from the village to the mountains. You can use that same script, put the player in that world. That's just one example. Or yeah. Yeah. That's all in what? Yeah, so if you download, all the scripts are already there. You could, so if you don't want to say like a maze, you don't want to create walls, you could create a few different transparent textures, visual text, like add a texture with no opacity or no alpha, and still have a collider. So it acts up in things like that. Okay, I'm gonna put the volume up a little bit. Okay, I want to talk about audio. So pickups, a couple of different pickup scripts, a destroy script with a few different options. And if I so if you guys, can you guys hear the sort of wind? Okay, so right now I'm inside that larger sphere. If I come out of it, the wind is silent. So Unity has both an audio and video API, and so there's play pause audio, and then there's also play pause video. And you so there's a couple public variables, audio clip and audio source. There's an on trigger event, again, based on a collider collision. In this case, if collider.tag is the same as player, audio listener.pause equals true, and then it will play a specific audio. So this is set up so any other ambient sound is paused, and you just hear the triggered audio. And then on trigger exit, so when the player leaves a specific place, the audio that was triggered is paused, and then you can once again hear what's in the environment. You can keep the ambient sound on just by commenting out the default audio listener. So, and then, okay, so I'm gonna go back to that wind sphere. I called it wind sphere. So this is just a basic 3D object. The transform, sphere, mesh render, and sphere collider are all just default components that come when you create a new I'll add another one. Let's create it. cube. And in the assets, I have audio. And I can just go ahead, I can just drag. So if we look at the cube right now, it's just a basic cube with the default components. As soon as I drag this audio, an audio source component is added. And it'll already have what I dragged into it. Audio clip Sam interview is added to it. So play on awake is automatically on. So if I hit play, we'll hear it immediately. I can turn on loop. So there's these different options, mute, bypass, output. So there's built-in audio mixers that you can set up and how different audio files in your world space interact with one another. There's volume from 0 to 1. You can give, the priority is about, like if you have a ton of audio and it's all set to high priority, it's going to slow down how well it runs on your computer. You can have it, by default, audio is set up when you first, so spatial blend, by default, it's set up to 2D. So you can have it pan to the left or right. And all of these elements can be programmed also, or can also be reworked through the mixer. Right now, if I play this, we're just going to hear that person's voice immediately.
But like when it implodes, let's say it implodes. When it implodes.
So if I switch, if I, let's put the volume way down.
But like when it implodes, let's say it implodes.
And then say I want it to be 3D audio instead of, or spatial blend, instead of having it be 2D, I'll have it be 3D. And what will then affect the volume will be min distance, min and max distance. So now the audio is tied to where you have placed it in the environment. It's no longer 2D audio just playing from both speakers.
But like when it implodes, let's say it implodes.
So if I get closer to it,
most people who did it, they're going to be like, I was an idiot.
It gets
I
a
made
lot
bad
louder.
Decisions, or do you think they're going to be like,
versus moving away from it, right?
There's something seriously wrong with our financial system.
So if I put the min distance at 2 meters instead of 1 or 3,
but like when it implodes,
it's louder.
let's say it
Although I'm
implodes.
here, it's
When
louder.
it implodes, do you think most people who did it, they're going to be like, I was an idiot. I made bad.
And if I set the min distance to 0, it's basically just muting it. It's still playing, but we'll never hear it because. So again, in 3D audio, we use these min and max distance in order to control the volume, but the volume is tied to where the first person controller is in relation to the audio object. Okay, there's another, I think, Kevin, this was tied to what you were asking about, delete this cube, or yeah. So I have I had an empty game object and I called it audio room. I gave it a cube and called it floor. And then there's an audio source that exists there that's tied to a sphere. So this audio room is these 2 game objects over here, and the floor has that play pause audio script. The interview audio is the one that we were just hearing, and the interview clip. I put the audio itself on that sphere. So it has an audio source, again, the same interview. And it's set up with a spatial blend of 3D. Actually, since I'm not destroying anything, I'm gonna go back to maximize on play.
But like when it implodes, let's say it implodes.
So that audio
when it
file
implodes,
has,
do you think most people who did it
has a little bit of silence at the start? So this script, instead of pause, you can use stop. And if you use stop, it starts back from the beginning. So right now, because it's paused, when I step off, it pauses the audio. But if I step on, it goes back to where I left off.
they're going to be like, I was an idiot, I made bad decisions? Or do you think they're going to be like, there's something seriously wrong with our financial system? But like,
so it's looped, so it'll start over.
When it implodes.
So the script is added to the floor because I'm using the floor as a trigger on its collider. You can see that the box collider has an on trigger event. Is trigger is turned on because I want it to be reactive to the player. And instead of, if I switch the audio listener from pause to stop, no, is it not stop? Why did I set up pause? Wait. Oh, here on interview clip, instead of pause, I'll have it stop and
But like when it implodes. But like when it implodes.
So now it's not starting back on from where I left off. It's starting from the beginning because I set it up to stop instead of pause. And go to there's a couple links I want to put point to. So Unity Audio, this repeats what I've just been saying about 3D versus the different settings. But I came back here to point that I included these links to the Unity manual that go, have a whole section about audio overview, files, tracker modules, audio mixer, and so what kind of files. So Unity has pretty great compression. So if you wanted to keep your sound at the highest quality, instead of bringing in a compressed format like MP3, you could bring in a WAV or AIFF file and let Unity do the work of compressing the file. And the sound should stay sharper. There is similarly for video, there's the video player component, and it's a material property that you can add as texture, and it walks through all the settings as well as a script example. So if we, going back So there's this plane here, and it's playing this this video. If I click on it, it'll pause. If I click on it again, it'll play. And when I pause it, this triangle shows up to, just as an indicator to hit play. It has a collider, so I can't walk through it. And it's not two-sided. So remember, planes by default aren't two-sided. You have to make them two-sided. So I can see the shadow, but I can't see my video from the other side. And I just walk through it. So let's look at that. So you can, it doesn't have to be a plane. It could be a cube, like anything you want to add video to. So if I go into my assets, since I made this downloadable, it is an MP4 and it's pretty short. Yeah, so it's imported as an MP4. If I create another cube and scale it. Something like that. It'll be good to figure out the dimensions of your video. And if I just drag, similarly as the audio, if I just drag it onto the cube, it will by default add this video player component with all of its so video source video clip, it will be this file. It'll by default play on awake. Wait for first frame to load to start playing. You can set it to loop. And yeah, I don't walk through these different settings. It has audio, which you can mute or put at a different and so this one is, available on all sides. So it's just, yeah, it's acting as texture. So this I'm trying to remember how to make a plane both two-sided. Convex. All right, I'm not gonna look at that right now. I was trying to remember, there's a way to make the plane two-sided. Okay, so it has a video added, so it automatically generates the video player component. And then there's this play pause video, which comes with a few public variables: play button material, pause button material. I don't think I thought I hadn't added anything because I want to play. I don't want. Yeah, so the pause, I didn't want two bars sitting on top of my video, so I just use an empty. It's just a no alpha PNG. And so again, I created an empty game object and added the plane, called it video plane, applied the video to it. And then there's a play button, which isn't visible when it's playing, but it's triggered when you click on that plane. And scenes, scripts. So play, pause video. Void awake video player, get component video player, screen render dot material, pause button material. That again, it's an invisible 0 alpha PNG. On mouse down, if video player is playing, video player dot pause, screen render dot material, play button material. So this is the line that shows the triangle, that makes the triangle visible. Else video player dot play, screen render dot material, play button material, or pause button material. And that replaces the play button material with the 0 PNG or the 0 alpha button. So you could, you know, set up like in the corner, like, you know, a controller. And I think the video, I believe the video player comes with its own set of components that you can turn on. I think, maybe. Huh, maybe not. So this is a really basic, there's a lot more that you can look at the documentation, because I think there's a, you know, just like in QuickTime or whatever, there's a controller that we can, that should come with this video API. Any video files. Oh, one thing that I discovered, which is pretty cool, is if you shot video against a blue or green screen, you don't have to go to After Effects and export a series of PNGs. You can, just like in Premiere or After Effects, you can chroma key, you can key out colors within Unity itself. Okay. Okay, so again, these scripts, I modified them to some extent. Hopefully they're not too buggy. They used to work great with the previous version of that FCP. So since this is using the video API, so there, you know, any script that you generate in the assets folder is by default going to have the Unity engine, and it's the public, whatever you named it is going to be the class that it's given when you open it. But then there's a bunch of different sets of classes of scripts that can be introduced, such as the user interface. If you create a script that that is intended for user interaction. So this is using the video API, so you have to include the namespace .video. So using Unity Engine .video, and then that opens up a whole other set of classes that you can make available, such as the play, pause, stop, that become available in your code, for you to manipulate. Is that the only one that's? So the audio one doesn't have another namespace like the video, but it does require component type of, it does require this line 3, require component type of audio source. But it's included, those classes are included in the Unity engine. Okay, so that's everything I had prepared. So these destroy, pick up, that's the one that requires left and right mouse clicks. Play, pause, audio and video, and then the throw object that you can carry and then throw. And I'll delete some of the stuff. Leave it as it was. The super character controller. So I'm not trying to code on the fly because I would probably mess things up. So that's why I brought everything ready. And there's a lot more interactivity that you could script or take advantage of, find other sources out there. All of this is designed for desktop interaction. If you guys have looked at the Unity, the starter asset, it comes with a whole series of scripts for mobile, as well as mobile interface. And when we get back after next week, we'll, like I mentioned, we'll jump into the VR and using that FCP instead of, and the reason I'm going through this is because this way you can build out your project so that it works on a desktop and have a desktop version. And then we could, later we can turn off, just like I've got this one turned off, we can turn this first person controller and replace it with a VR first person controller. There's going to be some scripts of interaction that aren't going to work. So either you can, say there's a ball, you can have 2 different scripts running, one for the VR and one for the desktop. Or we just duplicate the scene and have a VR version of it and a desktop version of it. And then when you go to the build, when we go to the build settings, switch it to, this doesn't have the Oculus imported, so we'd have to import the Oculus package and Unity's AR. Anyway, we'll worry about that after spring break. For now, my goal today was just to introduce some basic interaction and make sure that you guys, since you as media makers, be aware that video and audio are also interactable and can be part of the hierarchy in the project. Okay, so let me. Either people in the room or online, any questions, thoughts? things that you, and ideally with the presentation, this presentation, you can take a look at this scene and know where things are and sort of what, look at the scripts and you know, see how they're set up and what's patched to what. And I can also answer questions. I'm excited to use those bouncing animations. Feel like it'd be fun to add some visuals, Christy. So yeah, so those are part of the physics material. Any questions from you guys? No? Okay, great. All right, so let's take a, Mark had a question. Mark. Where'd he go? Above my, oh, all the scripts are available in the package, right? Yes, yeah. So if you go to today's date, yeah, it's in, so yeah, under today's, not 27th yet, go to today's date and download demo files, and it's, all those scripts are in either the package or the zip folder. So, okay, so for those of you online, if you want to just, I've already turned on the XR design development quiz, so you can switch to, the one thing that I didn't mention is about 3D art, which I think is, there's one question about 3D files, OBJ versus FBX. And so I'm going to give that one away because I think it's from a presentation. By the way, as far as like manipulating your textures, one of that tenement looking brick asset set of a city came with this texture file, which looks like, you know, it looks like it's something like London, but then there's also, Nene, is this Japanese? You're busy. Nene, that text, Korean? Okay. So I brought that into Photoshop and then replaced those portions with like papaya dog, Goodwill store, different images that I either photographed or found online.